There is a man who walks alone, not just in the streets, but in the corridors of his mind. He sits at tables where no one calls his name, gazes into the world but finds no familiar eyes gazing back. He is a man with no friend. He tells himself that he needs no one, that solitude is strength, that silence is his kingdom, but deep within he knows. A man without friends is a man without mirrors, without echoes, without warmth. He is a house with no windows, a ship that sails with no port to call home. There is a man who walks alone. He moves through crowded streets, past voices that rise and fall like the tide, yet none call his name. He sits in rooms filled with conversation, laughter, and the quiet music of companionship, but he is only an observer, never truly a part of the scene. His presence is like a shadow, noticed but never embraced. He is the lonely soul. He tells himself that this solitude is by choice. He has convinced himself that the world is too noisy, too demanding, too full of people who do not understand him. It is easier, he thinks, to walk alone than to risk disappointment. He has been hurt before, perhaps betrayed, perhaps forgotten, and so he has built walls around his heart, not of stone, but of silence. Silence is safer. Silence does not judge. Silence does not leave. But there is a danger in too much silence. At first it feels like protection, but in time it becomes a prison. The lonely soul begins to lose himself in his own thoughts. He convinces himself that no one cares, that no one truly sees him. He is a ghost, moving through life unnoticed, and the more he believes this, the more it becomes his reality. He fills his days with distractions, work, books, music, anything to drown out the quiet ache that follows him like a shadow. He tells himself that he does not need others. He watches the world move in pairs and groups, watches friendships bloom in warm laughter and knowing glances, but he tells himself that he is different, that he is meant to walk this path alone, that self-sufficiency is strength. And yet, there are moments, fleeting but undeniable, when the loneliness presses too heavily upon his chest, when he reaches for his phone but finds no one to call, when he watches the sky shift from golden afternoon to deep blue night and wishes there was someone to share the quiet beauty of it with, when a joke comes to mind, but there is no one beside him to laugh. These moments betray the truth he has tried so hard to deny. He was never meant to be alone. Life was never designed for isolation. A man without friendship is like a tree without roots, standing tall for a time but destined to wither. The soul, like the body, hungers, not for food or water, but for connection. Without it, something inside begins to starve, and starvation, whether of the body or the heart, will always lead to suffering. But what holds the lonely soul back is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of once again being left behind. He would rather be alone by choice than risk reaching out and finding himself unwanted. So he stays in the shadows, convincing himself that he prefers it there, even as the silence around him grows heavier. Yet what he does not see is that friendship is not given, it is built. It does not simply appear like the sunrise. It is something created, nurtured, and fought for. It requires the courage to step beyond the walls of comfort, to risk being seen, to risk being known. It requires patience, for trust is not formed in a day, nor is companionship. It requires effort, for true friendship is not about what one receives, but what one gives. Effort. And the truth is, the world is full of lonely souls, each waiting for someone else to make the first move, each hoping silently that someone will reach out, someone will care. The lonely soul is not alone in his loneliness, but he must be willing to take the first step, to offer a word, a kindness, an open heart, to step into the light, even if his voice trembles. For he may find, in the end, that he was never truly alone at all, that beyond the walls of silence there were voices waiting to welcome him, that the ache in his heart was never a burden to bear, but a call to seek, to find, and to be found. There is a certain pride in standing alone, a quiet satisfaction in believing that one needs no one, that strength is found in self-sufficiency. The man who relies on no one cannot be disappointed. The man who asks for nothing owes nothing in return. To be independent is to be unshaken, unmoved by the shifting tides of human relationships. Or so he tells himself. There is a beauty in self-reliance, but there is also a lie buried within it. A man who believes he needs no one has not yet faced the full weight of life. He has not yet felt the kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure, the kind of burden that no single pair of shoulders can carry. He has not yet encountered the storm so fierce that even the strongest will falters. For in the end, no matter how much a man convinces himself otherwise, he will one day discover that no soul was meant to walk this world entirely alone. He tells himself that to depend on others is weakness, that to lean on another is to risk falling when they step away. And perhaps he is right. Perhaps trust can be broken and reliance can lead to disappointment. But what he does not see is that isolation carries its own cost. A slow erosion of the spirit that leaves a man standing strong but hollow. He may convince the world that he is unshaken, but deep in the quiet of his own mind, in the moments where there is no one to impress, he will feel the weight of his own solitude. There is a deception in the idea that one can be entirely self-sufficient. The very breath in his lungs is borrowed from the trees, the food on his table the labor of unseen hands. Even the thoughts he believes to be entirely his own have been shaped by the voices of teachers, books, and experiences shared by others. The truth is, no man is an island. Every life is intertwined, woven together in ways both seen and unseen. In the works of one, to deny this is not strength, it is blindness. And yet he persists in his illusion. He wears his solitude like armor, mistaking it for invincibility. He tells himself that he is free, unchained by the expectations and disappointments that come with human connection. But there is a cost to this kind of freedom. A room without doors may keep trouble out, but it also keeps warmth from entering. A heart that refuses to rely on others may never feel the sting of betrayal, but it will also never know the depth of true companionship. He walks through life with a quiet sort of confidence, believing he is complete in himself. But then the day comes when the weight is too much, when grief knocks the breath from his lungs, when failure shakes the foundation he thought was unbreakable. He looks around and sees that there is no one beside him, not because people do not care, but because he never let them close enough to stay. He realizes too late that strength was never in standing alone, but in knowing when to reach for another hand. The world has never asked a man to be unbreakable. It has only ever asked that he be willing to stand, and when he cannot, that he allow others to stand for him. There is no weakness in admitting that we need one another. The trees do not apologize for leaning toward the sun. The rivers do not claim independence from the rain. To need is not to be weak. It is to be human. And so the illusion fades, not in a moment of grand realization, but in the quiet acceptance of truth. The strongest among us are not those who walk alone, but those who have the courage to walk together. There are treasures in this world that cannot be measured, riches that do not shine like gold but hold far greater worth. A man may gather wealth, power, and knowledge, but if he walks alone, his hands remain empty. For there is a gift beyond all others, a quiet and steady light in the darkest of days, a warmth that neither time nor distance can fade. It is the gift of true friendship. It begins in the simplest of ways. Two souls recognizing something familiar in each other, a shared laughter, an unspoken understanding. And yet, from that small beginning, something profound is born. A friend is more than just a companion for passing hours. He is the keeper of one's joys and sorrows, the witness to one's journey, the steady voice that remains when the world turns uncertain. There are moments in life when the weight of existence presses too heavily upon the shoulders, when burdens seem too great to bear, when failures whisper that one is not enough. In those moments, it is not wealth that saves a man, nor is it wisdom that gives him strength. It is the voice of a friend saying, "You do not walk alone." True friendship does not remove pain, but it stands beside it, refusing to let it consume. It does not erase hardship, but it lessens its sting, simply by the presence of someone who cares. The beauty of friendship is found in its simplicity. It does not ask for grand gestures or endless proof of loyalty. It flourishes in small moments. A shared silence that is never awkward, a knowing glance across a crowded room, the certainty that no matter how far one may wander, there is always a place to return. A true friend is not merely someone who knows one's story, but someone who has walked through it, step by step, without turning away. But friendship is not just a refuge in hardship, it is also the multiplier of joy. Happiness, when shared, becomes something greater than itself. A triumph celebrated alone is but a moment of satisfaction, but when witnessed by a friend, it becomes a memory, something etched into time. The best of life is not found in achievements or possessions, but in the echoes of shared laughter, in the stories that grow richer with every telling, in the knowledge that there is someone who truly sees you, not as the world does, but as you are. A friend sharpens the mind as iron sharpens iron. He does not merely agree, but challenges, does not flatter, but speaks truth, even when it is hard to hear. He reminds a man of who he is when he forgets, calls him toward something greater when he settles for less. There is no deception in true friendship, no need for masks or pretenses. It is a place where one can be fully known and yet still fully accepted. And yet, friendship is a gift that cannot be taken for granted. It is not something to be possessed, but something to be nurtured, to be given as much as it is received. The deepest friendships are not formed by accident, nor do they endure without effort. They require patience, trust, and the willingness to stand even when it is not easy. To have a true friend, one must also be one. There are those who move through life untouched by this gift, who build walls around themselves in the name of strength, who convince themselves that they need no one. But what they do not see is that they are not protecting themselves, they are robbing themselves. For a life without friendship is not merely lonely, it is incomplete. It is a story with no shared memories, a journey with no companion, a song that is never sung aloud. And so the greatest riches are not found in what a man owns, but in the voices that call his name with warmth, in the hands that reach for his in both joy and sorrow, in the certainty that when all else fades, he will not stand alone. Friendship is not a luxury, it is the quiet foundation upon which a full life is built. And those who have known its gift, even for a moment, have known something of life's truest and most beautiful joys. There is a man who has built walls around himself, not of brick and stone, but of silence and distance. He has convinced himself that these walls are his protection, that they keep him safe from disappointment, betrayal, and the sting of rejection. But what he does not realize is that the walls he has built to guard his heart have also become his prison. He looks out at the world from behind them, watching life happen beyond his reach. And though he tells himself he is content, there is a quiet ache he cannot silence. He is alone, not because the world has abandoned him, but because he has closed himself off from it. The walls of solitude are not built in a day. They rise slowly, brick by brick, shaped by past wounds, by moments of misunderstanding, by the quiet fear that if one lets others in, they will one day leave. And so, rather than risk the pain of loss, he chooses distance. He moves through life as an observer rather than a participant, convincing himself that solitude is a kind of strength. Yet deep inside, a voice whispers a different truth. No man was meant to walk this world alone. There comes a time when the silence becomes too heavy, when the echoes of one's own thoughts are no longer enough. The world outside the walls is full of life, full of voices calling out, full of hands reaching, but to grasp them requires something terrifying. It requires opening the gate, stepping beyond the safety of solitude, and daring to be known. It requires vulnerability, a word that many fear, for it means letting down the guard, exposing the self, risking rejection. But what is the alternative? A life locked away, untouched by love, by friendship, by the richness of human connection? A heart that beats but never truly feels? The walls must break, not with force but with courage. A single step forward, a single conversation, a single moment of honesty can begin to chip away at the fortress that has been built over years. It is not easy. There will be times when fear urges one to retreat, when doubt whispers that it is safer to stay hidden. But safety is not the same as living. A heart that never risks is a heart that never truly beats. The world beyond the walls is not perfect. There will be pain, there will be disappointment, there will be moments of loss, but there will also be laughter shared, burdens lifted, memories made that could never exist in isolation. To open the heart is to make space for joy as well as sorrow, for connection as well as loss, for a life that is full rather than merely endured. There is strength in solitude, but there is greater strength in connection. The bravest thing a man can do is not to build walls, but to break them. Not to guard himself against the world, but to step into it, arms open, willing to be seen, willing to be known. For the greatest risk is not in being hurt, it is in never truly living at all. A man may walk alone and still reach great heights, may labor in solitude and still gather wealth, may spend his days in quiet isolation and still accomplish much. But if he stands at the peak of his success and finds no one beside him, if he gathers treasures but has no one to share them with, if he sees the world but has no hand to hold along the way, then what has he truly gained? A life kept to oneself may be orderly, controlled, and seemingly free from the complications of relationships, but it is also a life that remains small, no matter how vast its achievements. For life, in its fullest form, is not measured by what is accumulated, but by what is shared. There is a simple truth that many learn too late. Joy, when kept to oneself, is fleeting, but when shared, it multiplies. A joke is not as funny when laughed at alone. A victory is not as sweet when there is no one to celebrate it. Even the most beautiful sunset, if witnessed in solitude, lacks the magic it holds when someone stands beside you, looking at the same sky, feeling the same awe. The richest moments in life are not those spent in isolation, but those woven together with the presence of others. Yet many fear the entanglements of human connection. Relationships require effort, friendships demand time, love comes with risks. To open one's life to others is to invite both joy and sorrow, both laughter and heartache. It is to make space for misunderstandings, disappointments, and the uncertainty of human nature. And so, some choose to keep their lives carefully guarded, believing that in doing so, they are protecting themselves. But what they do not realize is that while they may be avoiding pain, they are also shutting out the very thing that gives life meaning. A shared life does not mean a life without struggle. It does not erase hardship or remove obstacles. But what it does is lighten the burden, make the weight more bearable. A sorrow shared is a sorrow lessened. A heavy load, when carried together, no longer feels impossible to bear, and beyond the relief of shared burdens, there is the simple yet profound comfort of knowing that one is not alone, that in the moments of doubt, someone will remind you of who you are, that in the moments of despair, someone will sit beside you in the darkness until the light returns. The world may celebrate independence, may hold up the image of the self-made man, may preach the virtues of walking alone, but the greatest joys of life are not found in isolation. They are found in the hands that reach for yours when you stumble, in the voices that call your name with warmth, in the hearts that beat alongside your own. To live only for oneself is to live only half a life. But to share one's journey, to open one's heart, to give, to receive, to love and be loved, this is what it means to truly live. A single candle may give light, but when its flame is passed to another, the glow grows brighter. A single melody may be beautiful, but when joined by harmonies, it becomes a song. A life kept to oneself may be peaceful, predictable, safe. But a life shared, that is a life that grows, that expands, that multiplies in ways beyond measure. And in the end, it is not the years lived or the wealth gathered that will matter most, but the faces remembered, the hands held, the love given and received. A life shared is a life multiplied, and there is no greater richness than his.